The first strike came 3 days after Elena took command, and it changed everything. The Krethek thought they knew about the Vitharia convoy of supply ships was moving through an asteroid field on the edge of the system, carrying biological material harvested from conquered worlds to feed the hungry swarms of the Horde. The convoy commander expected no trouble because the Vathari had never attacked supply lines before. They were too honorable for such tactics, too proud to strike at anything. The warships Elena had spent 2 days teaching Vathari pilots how to hide their ships among the asteroids, how to mask their energy signatures, how to wait in perfect silence until the moment was right when the Vathari struck. They came from everywhere at once, emerging from the rocks like ghosts made of crystal and fury. The convoy never had a chance. Elena watched the battle from the obstinate, coordinating the attack through communication channels that shifted frequency every few seconds to avoid detection. Squadron 3, pull back and regroup, she commanded. Squadron 7, target the escort fighters. Do not let them call for reinforcements. Beside her, Corvith managed the ship's systems while Simon processed incoming data faster than any organic mind could follow. The convoy is breaking formation, Simon reported. 3 supply ships are attempting to flee. Let them go. Elena replied. Corvith turned to her with surprise in his reptilian eyes. Let them escape? He asked. They will report what happened here. I am counting on it, Elena said with a cold smile. I want the Krethek to know that their supply lines are not safe. I want them to start spreading their forces thin, trying to protect every convoy. Fear is a weapon, and we are going to use it. The battle ended in less than 20 minutes, and when it was over, the Vathari had destroyed 7 supply ships and 12 escort fighters, while losing only 2 vessels of their own. It was the first victory the Vathari had achieved in over a year. Word spread through the refugee stations like wildfire, and for the first time in longer than anyone could remember, the Vathari allowed themselves to hope. But Elena knew that one victory meant nothing against an enemy as vast as the Krethok Horde. She needed to hurt them again and again until they began to doubt themselves. Over the following weeks, she led a campaign of raids and ambush that struck the Krethek where they least expected it. She used the Vathari's natural bioluminescence to create false signals that lured Krethek patrols into ambushes in asteroid fields and gravity walls. She identified the locations of Krethek breeding pools and sent teams to poison them with toxins that killed larvae but left adult soldiers unharmed. Creating panic among the Horde's commanders, she targeted hive command nodes, the massive creatures that served as living communication centers for the Krethek, and destroyed 3 of them in a single night using nothing but boarding parties armed with explosives and courage. The Krethek began to fear the darkness between the stars for the first time in their long history of conquest. They were facing prey that fought back in ways they could not predict or counter, but the war took its toll on everyone who fought it. Elena drove herself without mercy, sleeping only when her body threatened to collapse, eating only when Corvith forced food into her hands. She planned every operation personally, studied every report, mourned every soldier who did not return. The Vathari died in her service, giving their lives for tactics they barely understood, trusting the human who had promised to lead them. Through the darkness, Elleris watched Elena with growing concern. As the weeks passed and the human's eyes grew harder and colder, "You push yourself too far," the Queen said one evening, as Elena reviewed casualty reports in the war room. "I push myself as far as necessary," Elena replied without looking up. "When did you last sleep?" "I do not remember." Siluris placed a gentle hand on Elena's shoulder, and the human finally raised her eyes to meet the Queen's gaze. "You cannot save us if you destroy yourself in the process," Siluris said softly. "Every hour I rest is an hour the Krethek use to plan their next attack. Elena replied. I cannot afford to stop. You are one being, Elena. You carry burdens that should be shared among thousands. There are not thousands available, Elena said. And her voice cracked with exhaustion she rarely allowed herself to show. There is only me. Soluris sat beside her and let her light patterns shift to something warm and comforting. You saved my pilot. Darren, yesterday, the Queen said. He told me that you flew the Obstinate into a Krethic formation to draw fire away from his damaged ship. You nearly died protecting him. He is a good pilot. We cannot afford to lose good pilots. Is that the only reason? Elena was quiet for a moment, and then she shook her head. No, she admitted. I protect them because they are fighting for me. They trust me to bring them home. That trust is sacred, and I will not betray it. That is what makes you different from other commanders. Soluris said, You do not see my people as resources to be spent. You see them as lives to be protected. Every life matters, Elena said. That is what humans believe, even if we do not always act like it. Their conversation was interrupted by an alarm that sent red light pulsing through the station corvettes. Voice crackled over the communication system with barely controlled panic. Captain, we have a problem, he announced. A very large problem. Elena and Soluris rushed to the command center, where tactical displays showed a fleet emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system. It was the largest Krethic force they had ever seen. Hundreds of hive ships arranged in perfect formation around a central vessel that dwarfed everything else. What is that? Soluris whispered, her light patterns shifting to pale fear. The flagship of Rekthis the All-Hunger? Elena replied, her voice grim. The Horde Queen herself. Simon provided additional data. Rekthis is the supreme commander of the Krethic Horde. She has personally overseen the consumption of over 40 civilizations. Records indicate that she has never lost a campaign. She came herself, Corvid said. We hurt them badly enough that she came herself. We should be flattered, Elena replied. Though there was no humor in her voice, a communication signal cut through the command center, and a face appeared on the main display that made every Vathri in the room recoil in horror. Rekthis was massive. Her insectoid body covered in armored plates that gleamed with the colors of worlds she had consumed. Her eyes burning with ancient hunger and absolute confidence. Pray, the Horde Queen spoke, a voice like grinding stone. You have caused my swarms considerable inconvenience. I have come to end your resistance personally. Elena stepped forward to face the display, and her scarred face showed no fear. You are welcome to try. She replied. Rekthis' eyes focused on Elena with sudden interest. You are the human, she observed. The Death Worlder who has taught these moths to fight. My soldiers speak of you with fear. They say you are a monster. I am just getting started. I am offering you a chance. Rekthis continued. Surrender yourself to me, and I will grant the Vidari a quick death. Refuse, and I will make their extinction last for generations. Elena turned to look at Soluris, and the Queen met her gaze with light patterns that blazed with fierce determination. Together they faced the display, and Soluris spoke for both of them. We refuse, the Queen declared. Come and take us if you can. But know this, we will make you pay for every life in ways your swarms cannot imagine. Rekthis' mandibles clicked with what might have been amusement. Then you choose extinction, she said. So be it. The display went dark, and Elena began to plan for the battle that would determine the fate of everything she had fought to protect. The final battle for Vathara began at dawn. When the light of the system star first touched the crystal spires of the orbital stations, Elena stood on the bridge of the Obstinate, watching the Krethic fleet advance across the void like a tide of darkness come to swallow everything in its path. She had prepared for this moment for weeks, laying traps and positioning forces and planning contingencies for every scenario she could imagine. But even she knew that the odds were against them. All squadrons report ready, Simon announced. Vathari forces are in position throughout the defense perimeter. What about the special payload? Elena asked. The modified beacon is prepared and loaded. Simon confirmed. However, I must remind you that the delivery plan requires the Obstinate to reach the Krethek flagship. Our probability of survival is effectively 0. I did not ask about our survival, Elena replied. I asked if the payload is ready. Simon was silent for a moment. And when he spoke again, his synthetic voice carried something that sounded almost like grief. The payload is ready. Captain, Corvith entered the bridge and took his station without a word. His 4 hands already working the ship's systems. You do not have to come with me, Elena said without turning around. We have had this conversation before, Corvith replied. My answer has not changed. You could live if you stayed behind. I could survive, Corvith corrected. There is a difference. Elena finally turned to look at her engineer. Her oldest friend, the being who had stood beside her through years of danger and loss. Thank you, she said simply coarse. Scales shifted in the Rithani equivalent of a smile. Thank me after we win, he replied. The battle began with far Karithak fighters poured from the hive ships, in waves that seemed endless, crashing against the Vathari defense lines like water against stone. But Elena had trained her pilots well, and they held their positions with a discipline that would have been impossible just weeks before the orbital stations became fortresses, their weapons filling the void with burning light that tore through Krethak formations. The asteroid belts became killing fields, where hidden mines and ambush teams turned every advance into a bloody nightmare for every ship the Vathari lost. They destroyed 3 Krethak vessels. For every station that fell, they dragged a dozen hive ships into death with them. But it was not enough. The Krethak numbers were simply too vast. Their willingness to sacrifice soldiers to absolute slowly, inevitably. The defense lines began to crumble. Stations 7 and 12 have fallen, Simon reported, his voice steady despite the chaos. Krethek forces are breaking through the secondary perimeter. Order all remaining forces to fall back to the inner stations, Elena commanded. Make them pay for every meter. She watched the tactical display and saw her careful plans unraveling under the weight of the Horde's numbers. It was time. Simon, plot a course for the Krethek flagship, she ordered. Course plotted, Simon replied. I have calculated 17 possible approach vectors. The one with the highest chance of success still gives. There's only a 4% probability of reaching the target. Which one gives us the best chance of actually delivering the payload? Vector 7. However, this approach requires us to pass directly through the main Krethek formation. Then that is our path. She opened a channel to Queen Soloris, who was coordinating the defense from the primary station. Your Majesty, this is Vasquez, Elena said. I am moving to execute the final phase of our plan. Soloris's face appeared on the display, her light patterns flickering with exhaustion and determination. You are sure there is no other way? The Queen asked. The modified beacon will only work if it is delivered to the heart of the Krethek fleet, Elena explained. And there is only one ship fast enough and stubborn enough to get it there. Elena, if I do this, your people might live, Elena interrupted gently. That is worth any price. Soloris's patterns shifted through colors of grief and gratitude and fierce love. You came to us as a stranger, the Queen said, and you leave us as family. Whatever happens today, the Vathari will never forget you. Just make sure there are Vathari left to remember, Elena replied. Vasquez out. She closed the channel and gripped the controls of the Obstinate. All hands. Prepare for final run, she announced. We have one chance to make this count. Let us not waste it. The Obstinate launched forward, its engines screaming as Elena pushed them beyond every safety limit. Krethek fighters swarmed toward them, filling the void with weapons fire that turned space itself into a storm of death. Elena flew like she had never flown before, weaving through the chaos with reflexes honed by decades of survival, dodging blasts that should have been impossible to avoid behind her. Corvith managed the shields and weapons with all four hands, returning fire at any target that came within range. Simon coordinated their systems and called out warnings faster than Elena could process. Consciously, they were halfway to the flagship when a Krethak beam punched through their shields and tore into the engine room. The obstinate shuddered and began to lose power. Corvith, status. Elena shouted. There was no response. Simon, where is Corvith? The engineer was in the engine room when the beam struck, Simon replied, his voice flat with synthetic grief. His vital signs have ceased. Elena felt something break inside her chest. But she did not have time to mourn. She pushed forward, coaxing every last bit of power from her dying ship, refusing to stop even as systems failed around her one by one. The Krethak flagship loomed ahead, massive and terrible, and Rekthis herself watched the tiny human vessel approaching with something like disbelief. Impossible, the Horde Queen hissed. What is that creature doing? Elena answered her question by ramming the obstinate directly into the flagship's communication array and activating the modified beacon. The signal that erupted from the device was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Elena had worked with the Vathari scientists to modify their bioluminescent communication patterns into something new, a frequency that targeted the neural pathways unique to Krethak soldiers, triggering their berserker rage response and directing it inward across the fleet. Krethak soldiers suddenly turned on each other. Hive ships tore themselves apart as their crews descended into mindless violence. Fighters crashed into their own carriers. The organized swarm became a chaos of self-destruction. Solace saw her chance and took it. All forces, attack, she commanded, and the Vathari surged forward in a desperate final charge. The battle that followed was brutal and beautiful and terrible all at once. The Krethak fleet, consumed by their own rage, could not coordinate a defense. Of Ithari pilots flew through the chaos, destroying enemy ships that were too busy fighting each other to notice when it was over. When the last Krethak hive ship had either been destroyed or fled, screaming into hyperspace, Soluris ordered search teams to sweep the wreckage. 3 days later, they found a life pod drifting among the ruins of the Krethak flagship. Inside, barely alive, was Elena Vasquez. She woke in the luminous throne room, surrounded by warm light and the gentle patterns of Vathari celebration. Queen Soluris stood beside her bed, her face shining with joy and tears of liquid crystal. You survived, the queen breathed. Against all odds, you survived. Elena tried to speak, but her voice was weak and her body was broken in more ways than she could count. Corvith. She managed to whisper. Solaris's light dimmed with sorrow. I am sorry, she said gently. Your friend did not survive, but we recovered his body. He will be honored as a hero of the Vathari people. Elena closed her eyes, and tears rolled down her scarred cheeks. She had won, but the cost had been higher than she had ever imagined. Solaris took her hand and held it gently. You came when no one else would, the queen said. You fought when there was no hope. You gave everything you had to save a people you never knew. Elena Vasquez, what are you? Elena opened her eyes and looked at the queen through a haze of pain and grief and something that might have been pride. I am human, she whispered. It is what we do. Across the galaxy, word spread of what had happened at Vathara. The Galactic Council demanded answers, unable to understand how a dying species and a single human had accomplished the impossible. Other species, the abandoned and forgotten and desperate, heard the story and began to whisper a new word: human. And somewhere in the void, another beacon activated. Another cry for help echoing through the darkness, and somewhere, another human heard it and set a course for the stars, the end. The Obstinate groaned and shuddered as it pushed through hyperspace, its old engines protesting against the demands Elena placed upon them. "Captain, I must advise against this course of action," Simon announced through the speakers, his synthetic voice carrying what might have been concern. "The Vettery system is deep within Krethek-controlled territory. Our chances of survival are extremely low." Elena did not look up from the navigation console as she made adjustments to their trajectory. "Define extremely low," she said. "Approximately 3%. Simon replied, "And that estimate assumes we do not encounter any Krethek patrols before reaching the inner system." "So you are saying there is a chance, Captain? I do not believe you are taking this situation seriously." Elena finally turned to face the blinking sensor array that served as Simon's primary visual interface. "I take every situation seriously," she said. "That is why I am still alive after 37 years in a galaxy that has been trying to kill me since birth." A door hissed open behind her, and a tall figure ducked through the frame to enter the cockpit. Corvith was Arithony, a reptilian species known for their mechanical genius and their tendency toward extreme caution. He had scales the color of rusted copper, 4 arms that ended in delicate fingers perfect for precision work, and eyes that always seemed to be calculating the odds of disaster. "I heard Simon's warning," Corvus said as he settled into the co-pilot's seat. 3% survival odds seem generous, considering our ship is held together with salvage wire and hope. "You built this ship," Elena reminded him. "I maintain this ship," Corvus corrected. "You fly it like you have a personal grudge against the laws of physics." Elena smiled, and the expression made the scars on her face twist into something that might have frightened most species. "The laws of physics have never done me any favors," she replied. "Why should I do them any?" Corvith made a sound that his people used to express exasperation and settled deeper into his seat. He had been with Elena for 6 years now, ever since she had found him drifting in an escape pod after the Rethani government had exiled him for asking too many questions about their weapons programs. In that time, he had learned that arguing with his captain was usually pointless. "Why are we doing this?" he asked instead. "The Vathari are strangers to us. Their war is not our war. There is nothing for us in that system except death." Elena was quiet for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the swirling colors of hyperspace outside the viewport. 70 years ago, she finally said. Earth was dying. Corvith tilted his head because he had heard Elena speak of her homeworld only rarely, and always with a tone that mixed love and grief in equal measure. "A plague was killing us," Elena continued. "Something engineered, something designed to wipe out humanity completely. We sent distress signals to every species we had ever contacted. We begged for help, for medicine, for anything that might save us." She turned to look at Corvith, and her eyes held an old pain that had never fully healed. "Do you know how many answered our call?" Corvith shook his head. "None," Elena said. "Not a single species lifted a finger to help us. They watched us die from a distance and calculated how they would divide up our territory after we were gone. But humanity survived. We survived because we refused to die." Elena replied. "We survived because a few stubborn scientists locked themselves in underground bunkers and worked for 3 years without sleep to create a cure. We survived because human beings would rather claw their way through hell than surrender quietly." She turned back to the navigation console and made final preparations for their approach to the Vathari system. "I remember what it felt like to send a cry for help into the void and hear nothing but silence," she said. "I will not do that to someone else. I will not let another species believe they are alone in the universe when they need help the most, even if helping them kills us. Especially then." Corvith was quiet for a long moment, And then he began checking the ship's weapon systems with his 4 skilled hands. "You are insane," he said, "but you are the good kind of insane. I suppose that is why I follow you." The obstinate dropped out of hyperspace 3 hours later. And what Elena saw made her grip the controls until her knuckles turned white. The space around Vethara was a graveyard. Thousands of ships drifted in the void, their hulls torn open like prey that had been gutted by predators. Crystalline vessels that must have once been beautiful now floated as broken wreckage among the twisted remains of Krethak warships. Elena guided the obstinate through the debris field slowly, her eyes scanning for any sign of life amid the death. "I am detecting energy signatures from several orbital stations near the planet," Simon reported. "They appear to be the last surviving Vathari installations. Any Krethak?" "Multiple hive ships are holding position at the edge of the system," Simon replied. "They appear to be regrouping after recent engagements. We have perhaps 6 hours before they resume their assault." Elena nodded and opened a communication channel on the same frequency that had carried the distress beacon. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Terran vessel Obstinate," she announced, her voice steady and clear. "I heard your call. I am here to help." Static filled the speakers for several long seconds, and Elena began to wonder if anyone was left alive to receive her message. Then a voice responded, musical and alien and heavy with disbelief. "Terran vessel. This is Queen Soluris of the Vathari Empire. We received your transmission. You say you have come to help us?" "That is correct. Forgive my confusion, but our sensors show only a single ship." "Are you the advanced scout for a larger fleet?" Elena exchanged a look with Corvith, who raised all 4 of his hands in a gesture that clearly meant she was on her own for this conversation. "Negative." Elena replied, "I am not part of any fleet. I am an independent operator. I heard your distress signal and came to offer my assistance." The silence that followed was long and heavy. "You came alone?" Soluris finally asked, and her voice carried something that might have been hope or might have been despair. "You answered our call knowing that you would face the Krethak horde with only a single ship?" "I answered your call because someone should have," Elena said simply. "And because I know what it feels like to cry out for help and receive nothing but silence." Another pause. And then Soluris spoke again with new urgency in her tone. "We are transmitting coordinates to our primary station," she said. "Please dock immediately. I would meet the being who travels across the galaxy to help strangers." "Understood," Elena replied. Obstinate out, she closed the channel and began guiding the ship toward the coordinates. She sounded surprised. Corvith observed, "Everyone is always surprised when humans do the right thing." Elena replied, "They expect us to be monsters. They call us Deathworlders and primitives, and say we are too violent and unpredictable to be trusted. Are they wrong?" Elena smiled that scarred smile again as the Obstinate approached the Vathari station. "They are completely right," she admitted. "We are violent and unpredictable and dangerous in ways that most species cannot understand. The difference is that we get to choose who we are dangerous for." The ship slid into a docking bay filled with frightened Vathari, who stared at the human vessel with wide eyes and flickering light patterns. "And right now," Elena finished as she powered down the engines and prepared to meet the Queen, "I choose to be dangerous for the people who need me." She stood, checked the pistol on her hip, and walked toward the airlock behind her. Corvith muttered something in his native language that Simon helpfully translated as a prayer for protection against stubborn captains who insisted on being heroes. Elena laughed and opened the door to meet whatever fate awaited her on the other side. The stars were dying above Vathara, and Queen Soluris watched them fall one by one like tears of fire across the endless black sky. She stood at the great window of the luminous throne room, her wings folded tight against her back, her pale body flickering with dim light that spoke of exhaustion and grief in the ancient Language of her people. The Vathari did not speak with voices as other species did. They spoke with light, with patterns that danced across their moth-like bodies, telling stories and sharing emotions in ways that words could never capture. But now the light of her people was fading, and Soluris felt the weight of their extinction pressing down upon her like a mountain made of sorrow. "My queen," her advisor Theron called from behind her, his own light patterns weak and afraid. "The outer stations have fallen." Soluris did not turn to face him because she already knew what he would say next. "How many survived?" she asked, though she feared the answer. "Fewer than 1,000. Theron replied. "The Krithek consumed the rest." The Krithek were nightmares given flesh, insectoid monsters that swept across the galaxy like a plague of hunger and death. They did not conquer worlds for territory or resources in the way that other empires did. They consumed civilizations for biological fuel, breaking down entire species into nothing more than food for their endless swarms. For 3 cycles, they had hunted the Vathari, and in that time, Soluris had watched her empire crumble into dust and ash. 90% of her fleet was destroyed, scattered across the void as twisted metal and frozen bodies. Her generals were dead, eaten alive on the bridges of their own ships, while their crews screamed in terror. Her people now huddled in the last orbital stations around their homeworld, starving and sick and waiting for the end that everyone knew was coming. "The Galactic Council has responded to our plea," Theron continued, his light patterns shifting to convey reluctant truth. Soluris finally turned to face him, and her eyes held a spark of desperate hope. "What did they say?" Theron's light dimmed with shame as he delivered the message. "They said the Vathari Empire is not strategically significant enough to warrant intervention. They send their condolences and wish us peace in our final hours." The hope in the Queen's eyes died like a candle flame in a storm. She had begged the Council for help, had offered everything her people possessed, had humbled herself before species who once feared the Vathari's power, and they had abandoned her without a second thought. "Leave me," Soluris commanded. Her voice hollow and empty. Theron bowed low and retreated from the throne room, leaving his queen alone with her grief and her rage and her terrible despair. Soluris walked slowly through the empty chamber, past the crystal pillars that once glowed with the collected light of 1,000 generations, past the murals that showed the glory of Vathari history stretching back 10,000 years. All of it would be forgotten when the last of her people died. All of it would vanish, as if it had never existed at all. She stopped before an ancient device that sat upon a pedestal of black stone, covered in dust and wrapped in chains of ceremonial silver. The beacon of last light had not been activated in 5,000 years. Not since the Dark Age, when the Vathari had faced extinction at the hands of enemies long forgotten. It was a distress signal of ultimate desperation, a cry for help that would broadcast on all frequencies, across all known and unknown space. Her ancestors had sealed it away because they feared what might answer such a call. "My queen, you cannot be serious," a voice called from the shadows, and Soluris turned to see her war master Kethrin emerging from behind a pillar. He was old and scarred, the last of her military commanders still alive, and his light patterns blazed with alarm. "The beacon will call to everything in the void," Kethrin warned. "We do not know what monsters might hear it. We do not know what horrors might come. The Krethek are already here," Soluris replied, her voice steady despite the trembling of her wings. "What could possibly be worse than what we already face?" "There are stories," Kethrin insisted. "Legends of species so violent and unpredictable that even the Krethek avoid their territories. Deathworlders from planets of poison and fire who kill for sport and wage war for pleasure. Stories told to frighten children," Soluris said as she began to remove the chains from the beacon. "My queen, please reconsider this madness." Soluris paused and looked at her war master with eyes that had seen too much death and carried too much sorrow. "Kethrin," she said softly, My people are dying. My children are starving. My empire is ash. The civilized galaxy has turned its back on us and left us to be devoured like animals. She pulled the last chain free and placed her hands upon the beacon's cold surface. I will not let my people die in silence, she declared. I will not let the Vathari fade into nothing without at least trying to reach someone. Anyone who might care enough to help. And if what answers is worse than the Krethek. Silurus activated the beacon, and light exploded from the device like a star being born, racing outward through the walls and into the void beyond. Then at least we will not die alone. She whispered. The signal spread across space at speeds that defied understanding, passing through systems and nebulae and the great empty stretches between galaxies. It carried with it the voice of Queen Silurus, translated into 1,000 languages, crying out the same desperate message over and over again. We are the Vathari. We are dying. Our enemies are endless, and our hope is gone. We beg anyone who hears this signal to help us. Please, if there is mercy anywhere in this universe, answer our call across the void in a region of space that most species avoided. A battered ship called the Obstinate drifted through an asteroid field. Its hull was scarred with plasma burns and patched with metal plates that did not match, held together by welding and determination and what its captain called creative engineering. Inside the cockpit, a human woman sat with her boots propped up on the console, reading from a cracked datapad while alarms blinked around her. Captain, Elena Vasquez, was not a pretty woman by any standard. Her face was marked with scars from battles she rarely spoke about. Her hair was cut short and practical, and her eyes held the cold patience of someone who had seen death many times and no longer feared it. Captain, a synthetic voice called from the ship's speakers. I am detecting an unusual signal on multiple frequencies. Elena lowered her datapad and raised an eyebrow. Unusual how, Simon? The AI that ran the Obstinate systems was a salvaged remnant from a dead warship. Quirky and sometimes unsettling, but fiercely loyal to the woman who had given him a second life. It appears to be a distress beacon of alien origin, Simon reported, broadcasting in over 1,000 languages simultaneously. The message is a plea for assistance against an enemy, identified as the Krethek Horde. Alana's expression hardened at the name. She knew the Krethek. Everyone who traveled the outer systems knew the Krethek. They were the reason entire sectors of space sat empty and silent, stripped of life and hope. Play it, she commanded. The speakers crackled, and then a voice filled the cockpit, alien and musical and heavy with exhaustion and grief. We are the Vathari. We are dying. Please, if there is mercy anywhere in this universe, answer our call. Elena listened to the message 3 times, her face unreadable, her scarred hands gripping the arms of her chair. Then she sat forward and began plotting a course through the stars. Somewhere out there, a queen was waiting for an answer, and Elena Vasquez had never been good at ignoring a cry for help. The Vathari who surrounded Elena as she stepped off the Obstinate were terrified of her, and she could not blame them for their fear. To their eyes, she must have looked like something from a nightmare, a creature of meat and bone with no natural light, no wings, no grace, a predator from a death world where everything competed to survive, and only the most dangerous species rose to dominance. Elena kept her hands visible and her movements slow as guards led her through corridors of crystal and fading light. The station was beautiful in a way that made her heart ache, because she could see that it had once been magnificent, and now it was dying like everything else. The Vathari had built refugees huddled in corners and alcoves, their bioluminescent patterns dim with hunger and despair. Children clung to their parents and stared at Elena with huge eyes that held no hope. The air smelled of sickness and recycled oxygen that had been filtered too many times by the time they reached the throne room. Elena had counted over 4,000 civilians crammed into a space designed for perhaps 1,000. Situation was worse than she had imagined. Queen Soluris awaited her on a platform of pale stone, surrounded by advisors whose light patterns flickered with alarm at the sight of the human. Queen herself was taller than Elena had expected. Her moth-like wings folded elegantly behind her back, her body covered in patterns of silver light that spoke of ancient nobility and current exhaustion. "You are smaller than I anticipated," Soluris said, and her voice carried genuine surprise. "Our records describe humans as towering deathworlders, who can tear through metal with their bare hands." "Your records exaggerate," Elena replied. "We are only slightly stronger than average for oxygen-breathing species. And yet you came here alone to face the Krethek." "I never claimed to be smart." A ripple of confused light passed through the assembled advisors. They did not seem to understand humor as humans practiced it. Soluris studied Elena for a long moment, her multifaceted eyes searching the human's face for something that only she could identify. "Why?" the Queen finally asked. "Why would you risk your life for a species you have never met?" "Because you asked for help," Elena answered simply. "Many species have asked the galaxy for help. The galaxy rarely answers. Then the galaxy should be ashamed of itself." Soluris's light patterns shifted to display an emotion that Elena could not read, and the Queen descended from her platform to stand face to face with the human. "You interest me, Captain Vasquez," Soluris said. "Tell me, in your honest opinion, can we survive this war?" Elena looked around the throne room at the frightened advisors and the desperate refugees visible through the open doors. "If you continue fighting the way you have been fighting—" "No," she said bluntly. "The Krethek have superior numbers, superior firepower, and they are willing to sacrifice infinite soldiers to achieve their goals. In a straight fight, you lose every time." Murmurs of dismay rippled through the court, and light patterns flared with anger. "Then, what would you have us do?" demanded Catherine, the War Master, pushing through the crowd to confront Elena. "Surrender and be devoured like cattle?" "No," Elena replied, meeting his hostile gaze without flinching. "I would have you stop fighting like Vathari and start fighting like humans." "What does that mean?" Elena turned to address the entire court, her voice carrying clearly through the crystal chamber. "The Krethek expect you to be honorable," she explained. "They expect you to meet them in battle, ship against ship, fleet against fleet, because that is how civilized species wage war. They expect you to follow rules and traditions that put you at a disadvantage against an enemy that respects nothing. Honor is the foundation of our civilization," Soluris said quietly. "Honor is a luxury for species that are not facing extinction." Elena countered. "Right now your only goal should be survival. Everything else can be rebuilt later, but only if there are Vathari left alive to do the rebuilding. You speak of abandoning our principles. I speak of adapting your tactics." Elena began to pace, her boots echoing on the crystal floor as she organized her thoughts. "Humans learned long ago that the strongest army does not always win," she said. "Sometimes the most stubborn army wins. Sometimes the most creative army wins. Sometimes the army that is willing to fight dirty when everyone expects them to fight clean wins." "Fight dirty?" Catherine repeated with obvious disgust. "Guerrilla warfare," Elena explained. "Instead of meeting the Krethek fleet in open battle, you strike their supply lines. Instead of defending positions you cannot hold, you ambush their commanders and fade away before they can respond. Instead of playing by their rules, you make them play by yours. Such tactics are cowardly. Such tactics kept humanity alive when we should have died 100 times over." Elena shot back. "We have fought wars on our own world for thousands of years. And the one truth we learned is that victory goes to whoever refuses to give up." Soluris held up a hand to silence her War Master before he could respond. "You believe these tactics can save my people?" she asked. I believe they can hurt the Krethek badly enough to make them reconsider this war. Elena replied, right now they see you as easy prey. They believe you will break and scatter like every other species they have consumed. If we can show them that hunting the Vathari will cost more than they are willing to pay, they may decide to seek easier targets elsewhere. And if they do not, then at least you will die fighting on your own terms instead of theirs. The court was silent as Soluris considered Elena's words, her light patterns shifting through colors that spoke of deep thought and difficult decisions. Finally, the queen turned to face her advisors and her war master. And when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of royal authority. We have tried fighting with honor, she declared. We have tried following the traditions of our ancestors. We have done everything our civilization has taught us to do. And still we face extinction. Her light blazed brighter than Elena had yet seen it. Perhaps it is time to try something new. My queen, Catherine began. I have made my decision, Soluris interrupted. Captain Vasquez will train our remaining forces in human tactics. She will have full authority to plan and execute operations as she sees fit. Her orders will carry the weight of the throne. Shock rippled through the court in waves of brilliant light. You would give command of our military to an alien? Catherine demanded. To a human? I would give command to someone who has demonstrated courage and conviction, Soluris replied. Qualities that have been in short supply among my own advisors. Catherine's light patterns flared with humiliation, and he stepped back with a bow that barely concealed his resentment. Soluris turned to Elena and extended one delicate hand in a gesture that was clearly meant to seal their agreement. Can you save us, Captain Vasquez? Elena took the queen's hand and felt the strange texture of Vathari skin. Cool and smooth like polished glass. I do not know if I can save you, she admitted honestly. But I can promise you this. I will fight beside you until the end, whatever that end may be. You will not face the darkness alone. Soluris's light pattern shifted to something warm and grateful. And for the first time since Elena had arrived, she saw hope in the queen's ancient eyes. Then let us begin, Soluris said. Teach us to fight like humans. Elena smiled her scarred smile and released the queen's hand. First lesson, she announced to the court. Everything you think you know about war is wrong. Forget honor, forget tradition, forget the rules. From this moment forward, we fight to win. And in the depths of space, the Krethek horde prepared their final assault, unaware that the prey they had been hunting was about to become something far more dangerous.